In May 2026, I raced my second Hyrox competition and we placed in the top 13%. Despite it being an evening race, I had zero GI issues and felt great. In this episode, I'm taking you behind the scenes of my full Hyrox weekend, the week before, 2 days out, all the way through race day, and recovering after as a gut health dietitian and endurance athlete. The thing with endurance athletes, including both long distance runners and Hyrox athletes, is that they often mismanage their carb load or try something new on race day. And that's where things can go sideways fast, especially for those of us with sensitive guts. In this episode, I'll walk you through race prep and strategy to ensure we stayed calm and confident, how I structured my carb load without triggering symptoms, my exact race day fueling plan, including hydration, carbs, and caffeine for an evening race, the gut friendly strategies that helped keep everything calm on race day, and how I approached recovery to bounce back quickly. Let's get into it. If you're new here, hi, I'm Lee Murato. I'm a registered dietitian, gut health expert, and endurance athlete. I help active individuals break free from gut symptoms and fuel performance. If you're looking for one-on-one support for IBS, gut health, and/or performance and endurance fueling, apply for coaching to work together from the link in the show notes. And if you've been following these episodes for a while, or you're on my email list or my social media, you'll know that I raced a marathon in Milan on April 12th, 2026, which you can watch a previous recap episode all about the fueling and how that went, which I will link in the show notes. And I ran a personal best in that marathon of 3 hours and 26 minutes. And then just 4 weeks later, I raced a Hyrox competition in Ottawa, Canada on May 13th. This was my second Hyrox competition, and I competed in the mixed doubles category with my partner, who is a personal trainer, Mike. You can check him out at Contralateral on Instagram or contralateralfitness.com. The first time I did a Hyrox competition, so the one in May in Ottawa was my second. My first Hyrox competition was in Toronto in October of 2025, and I raced in the women's open singles category. So I will be honest here and say Hyrox is not my main sport. I'm not an elite Hyrox athlete, and I don't have a ton of experience with these competitions. I have a lot more experience with road running and racing, but the nutrition component is similar to preparing for a half marathon race in terms of fueling and physiological demands. And as you have probably gathered, how you feel and set up your gut can really impact your time and your performance. So I wanted to share more about my personal prep for my competition to hopefully give you a little bit of inspiration and insight. And these are also things that I work with a lot of athletes. I do have a lot of athletes and clients who work and who compete in Hyrox competitions as well. So we're going to get a bit of insight in terms of approaching the nutrition component from both a GI and performance perspective as a dietitian. Now, if you aren't too familiar with Hyrox, some of you listening may have already done one or you're training for your first competition, and others listening are probably like, Hyrox, I've never heard of that before. So basically, just for a little definition, it is considered a fitness race. It is one of the trendiest fitness trends right now as of 2026 that basically involves 8 functional exercises with a 1 kilometer run in between. So the exercises include 1,000-meter ski erg, 50-meter sled push, 50-meter sled pull, 80-meter burpee broad jumps, 1,000-meter row, 200-meter farmer's carry, 100-meter sandbag lunges, and 100 wall balls. So there are different divisions you can choose to race in, and they impact your weight. I will pop a chart up on the screen showing weights for different categories so you can see that. With the mixed doubles category, which I just raced, you can divide up the exercises with your partner. So if you do doubles, whether it's women's doubles or men's doubles or mixed, which is a male and a female, man and woman, you can split up the exercises however you want, but you still have to do all your runs together. You also have to remain within arm's length of your partner for the entire race. So this race was a bit different from my previous one, which was a women's singles where I did all the weights and all the runs myself, but it was slightly lighter weights because it was the women's open category. But this one was heavier weights, but I was able to split them up with Mike. That may sound slightly easier from a performance perspective, but mixed doubles can be made or broken with strategy as well. So let's get into the preparation the week before the race in terms of mindset, nutrition, and strategy. So in terms of nutrition, the week before I had slowed my volume of training down about 5 days before the race. I didn't want to do a longer taper, sort of that period of time where you decrease your volume and sort of keep intensity similar to help you feel fresh to perform on a goal race. Just because I didn't have as much time to train post marathon. So I wanted to find a balance of getting more comfortable with the exercises again while still having enough time to recover and feel fresh for the race. I didn't have a coach for Hyrox specifically, so I wasn't following any specific training plan, but I have done a lot of racing in the past and almost 2 decades of experience with high training levels. So I'm pretty in tune with how much I can push in order to then recover well and still feel fresh for a really hard effort. So despite tapering exercise volume 5 days out from the race, I kept my nutrition pretty consistent. So high protein, plenty of carbohydrates, and didn't cut anything out. So this is really important during the taper period as it helps your body to maximize glycogen stores, which is your muscle and liver storage of carbohydrates that your body draws on during extended exercise. And especially if you're doing a carb load 2 days out from the race, so particularly important for the marathon distance, but as we'll get into, somewhat important for your half marathon or your Hyrox type races, which I typically will do, an amount similar to a half marathon race. So by making sure that you are still keeping your carbohydrates high even the week before an event and not, cutting out your calories, that can help the carb load to be more efficient. What is common though is for a lot of runners and even Hyrox athletes too to decrease their calorie and carb intake in the taper period because they feel like you're exercising less and you're not burning as much before a longer event, but it could actually sabotage you. So I make sure to keep consistent intake even while I'm training a bit less. From a GI perspective, I also make sure that I'm keeping up with my bowel routine. So things that I do are hydration, movement, getting a certain amount of fiber every day, being consistent with sleep just to make sure that I'm clearing out effectively and I'm not setting myself up for any risk for constipation either the day prior, which then could lead to, more GI discomfort on race day. What I also mentioned that's important about a Hyrox race is strategy. So mixed doubles, where you have to share the exercises with your partner, really is a strategy game. So if you want to go into the race feeling confident and calm, which also helps your gut feel calm too, right? We know that our gut and our brain are connected. So if we're feeling prepared, we're feeling like we've done everything that we can, the hay's in the barn, that also too can help us to just feel calmer and also, reduce those nerves that could impact our gut. So making sure that you and your partner are on the same page with strategy is important for a mixed doubles event. And also if you're doing singles, to have an idea of your strategy and how you're going to pace yourself is helpful too. So while Mike and I didn't do all of our training sessions together, we did do some training sessions together. And during these, we would chat about best approach for different exercises and practice some of the transitions like row and passing the sandbag for lunges. Then 3 days before the race, we really fine-tuned that strategy. So Mike created a Notion page, basically. Notion is like a planning tool to decide who would start or finish each exercise, how many reps we would do before we would pass it off to the other partner, if we needed any action words during the race, pacing goals for each of the runs, and our predicted water breaks. So this helped ensure we could just focus on racing and not trying to communicate in too many words before the competition, because yes, this event really gets you gassed and out of breath. So you don't want to be trying to communicate and make sure you're on the same page during the event either. That helps as well. So let's talk about carb loading for performance and also GI comfort. So as I mentioned in my Milan Marathon recap episode, carb loading is a common place where endurance athletes can set themselves up for a GI disaster if they don't execute it properly. So if you looked around online for carb loading, you've probably seen various figures, 6, 8, 10 grams of kilograms per day for 2 up to a week before the race. Maybe you've seen different figures for your marathon, your half marathon, your Hyrox, right? have Gatorade, eat graham crackers, take a few gels. It all counts towards those targets. While those suggestions may be helpful for some, it might not work for you depending on your individual needs, as well as your history with training and nutrition. Further, if you deal with GI issues during training and or have a condition like IBS or even GERD or IBD, you will need a much more nuanced approach. And of course, it depends on the length of your race. So while the number varies for individuals, most people run out of glycogen or that stored carbohydrate in your muscle cells after about 90 minutes. So we want to be taking in carbs for fuel for events that are 75 to 90 minutes or longer. Since the average Hyrox time for most is around an hour and 30 minutes, most people will do well with a smaller carb load, similar to something you would do for a half marathon distance if you found it effective before. I know a lot of people now who are doing back-to-back Hyrox races, sometimes in the same day. So I might look at that as potentially making sure that you're refueling appropriately after the race, but potentially even considering a higher carb load there. In my condition, I have quite a bit of experience with carb loading for different distances, the marathon, the half. So for our Hyrox event, while we were aiming for a time of 75 minutes or under, this is what I did in order to fuel performance while also keeping my gut happy. So I kept about 5 to 6 grams per kilogram of body weight over 2 days pre-race. Since the race was actually Friday evening, it wasn't a morning race, which a lot of the races that I'm used to are, I shifted this to be more so the 48 hours leading up to the race. So ensuring good carb intake Wednesday evening, which was 2 days out from the race, then all day Thursday, and then during the day on Friday before our 6:30 p.m. race start. Lower FODMAP foods are what I focused on for my carbohydrate sources. So this has been shown in systematic reviews to help reduce the risk for exercise-induced GI symptoms. I do like to include some fruit and vegetables in my carb load just because they are a natural source of electrolytes. A little bit of fiber for me I find works better. I don't do well with a really low fiber diet, and habitually I generally get around 50 to 60 grams of fiber per day. So I don't like to drop it too low because then I don't want to put up the risk for getting constipated. So I keep it a little bit higher and add some lower FODMAP fruits and vegetables. And I do taper down the protein a little bit too, but don't like to drop too much because we want to make sure we still have regulated blood sugars during carb load. I use Chronometer to track, which is a nutrition tracking software, just to make sure I'm on track with the carb load. And I also have the clients, athletes that I work with do this too, if they're doing some different foods for their carb loads for races. But I will often create custom carb load menus for clients so they know exactly what to follow. So let's talk about the day before. So the day before, I actually worked in the morning. It was a Thursday. Saw some clients, which was nice. And then I did my weekly journal reviews. And then we packed up because our race was on Friday evening. So we decided to drive to Ottawa the day before. So on Thursday, we left around 2 p.m. Mike picked me up after my physio appointment. Unfortunately, I needed to get an emergency physio visit because I had been dealing with a nerve irritation flare-up, which flared up on the Monday or Tuesday of that week. Basically happens, I get sort of tight, low muscles in my low back and it compresses the nerve a little bit and it shows up as some hip pain, which for me, I think happened combination of just the marathon was intense, training for Hyrox. I wasn't able to see my massage therapist on my normal 3-week schedule. I had a bit more personal stress going on and all that sort of culminated into a nerve irritation. So thankfully I was able to see the physio and he helped me get it calmed down. So we left from there. We got into Ottawa around 7 p.m., unchecked or checked in, unpacked our bags and everything. And we did plan to bring our dinner with us so that we could eat it in the hotel. I didn't want to have to worry about, sourcing a restaurant or trying to find, something that would work for a lower FODMAP carb load. So it was just easier to prep everything and bring it there. I actually had requested in my note to the hotel if they could make sure that we did have both a fridge and a microwave in the kitchen. And they were nice enough to make sure that our unit did have a microwave. So that was really awesome. So we were able to just eat dinner in the hotel, didn't have to worry about going anywhere, and then kind of relaxed and check things out after. So let's talk about race day Friday. So for the morning and early afternoon, obviously I had quite a bit of time before the 6:30 race. So I did wake up, I had some water as usual. I generally start the day with about 500 mils of water. And then I went for about a 4K shakeout run in Ottawa. I haven't run in Ottawa before, so that was really nice. Usually I'll do a shakeout run the day before a race, but because the race was in the evening, I did it the morning of. Also, because I was still dealing with a bit of that nerve irritation, I wanted to keep things warmed up so that they wouldn't stiffen up overnight. Doing a shakeout run, though, has been shown to help increase blood plasma volume. A little bit of strides as well can also help get the legs turning over and feeling good for race day, but I did keep it easy that morning. So I ran around the local area, and then at the end discovered we were close to the Parliament building with a really nice park, and it had a gorgeous view of St. Lawrence River. So it was a really nice day. Then I came back, I had a breakfast with some fruit, protein shake, and some dates to get the carb load going, and then had a shower. Then we took a walk to this really lovely coffee shop called Little Victories. I did some work there. They had the best lattes that I've ever had. So delicious oat latte, which was nice and strong, which was delicious. And it had a really gorgeous view of the Parliament building. And there were tons of tulips outside because it was spring. After that, we had lots of time still, so we stopped at Farm Boy to pick up some groceries just to have some additional food on hand. I did bring some stuff from home, some staples like the oatmeal that I like and some different snacks and whatnot. But for some of the fresher stuff, we did go to the grocery store just to pick some stuff up to have the right food on hand for the carb load. And then got back to the hotel. I did have a bigger lunch around 1 p.m. So I wanted that to be substantial enough to be my main meal about 5 hours before the race, so not having anything too close. And I wasn't going to have dinner before the race, even though it was at 6:30, and keep it a little bit higher in fat, but not too high. So I had a couple boiled eggs. I had a container of overnight oatmeal with some fruits, Greek yogurt, and some almonds. I wanted to keep this moderate fat to provide energy, a good dose of protein and carbs to help continue keeping my glycogen stores high. And then I also kept it lower FODMAP friendly to help prevent any GI issues during the race. After that, did a little bit more work, and then I had another snack a couple hours later with a little bit of dark chocolate, an oat-based bar, and a decaf coffee. So let's talk about the pre-race prep. So right now it's about 3 p.m. We've got 3.5 hours to the race. So I did some mobility and glute activation work in the gym area at the hotel. I always like before either workouts, but especially before harder races, just to make sure everything is working properly. I like to do different spine mobility, hip mobility exercises, and do some things to activate my glutes. I always find I feel better and work better to do that, and I wouldn't have been able to do that at the race start. So even though it was 3 hours before, I find it still feels good by the time we get to the race. Then I came back, got ready. I did have a large container of water with some electrolytes and a bit higher sodium about 2 hours before, just to preload some electrolytes and some more hydration, and was planning to kind of taper off my fluid after that. And then we headed to the race start, which was about half an hour away from the hotel. So in the car, which was about 75 minutes before the race start, so this was around 5:15, I did have my sort of pre-race fuel. So I had a small amount of liquid with some black currant juice with a little bit of caffeine. So I had about 50 milligrams of caffeine before the race. Usually I would have more if it was a morning race, but because it was in the evening, I just didn't want to take too much because I didn't want it impacting my sleep. And I had already had caffeine in the morning with the coffee. So I had some rice cakes, a couple dates, and a small protein shake in the car, so I could time it for about, that 75 minutes before the race, which I do find works well when I do around that distance, and keeping it low fat, low fiber, and low FODMAP friendly. So we got to the race venue at about 5:30, so just an hour before, which was plenty of time. That gave us some time to use the bathroom, get checked in, check in our bags, and then you can actually go to the whole warm-up area. So with Hyrox, they do have a whole warm-up area set up. You can use treadmills, they have a rower, you can practice all the exercises, sandbag lunges, your transitions, wall balls, etc. So I spent about 30 minutes doing a little bit of light jogging, practicing with the wall ball, and a few of the different exercises just to get into the motions and get my heart rate up. Super important also before hard efforts. You want to make sure you ease into it and your heart rate has some time to get up. Your central nervous system is primed and you do feel way, way better. So that was it. And then the race start was at 6:30. So let's talk about how everything went during the race. So as I mentioned, our heat started at 6:30 because in Hyrox, even though you're competing with people in the same category generally, although there may be some people from a previous start, you do start in different heats. So generally, I think it's about like 20 people start in a heat every 10 or so minutes. So our division mixed doubles started at 6:10, and then our heat went out at 6:30. So what was nice too is that you start in the Red Bull start area, and there's like a mindset coach in there who just gives you a little bit of a pep talk, tells you to relax, breathe. You do some breathing exercises before they send you off. So that was nice to just kind of help calm down the nerves. Calm down the nervous system before a very intense effort. And then the gun went off at 6:30 and we were off to the races. So for Hyrox, I'll talk a little bit about the strategy here and then we'll get into the nutrition. But for Hyrox, you always start with a 1 kilometer run. So there were a lot of people who started out really fast as soon as the time went off. But we had decided with our strategy that we wanted our first kilometer to be the slowest, because a common mistake in Hyrox is that people start off too fast, they don't pace themselves well, and then they blow up and they're not able to continue at the same intensity throughout the race. So the thing is, everyone gets swept up in everyone else's race. You see people going by so quickly, you want to go fast as well, but we decided to be conservative and slow things down. When we looked at our splits after, we noticed that actually we were behind. We were at a much lower ranking for the first exercise, but we slowly surpassed a lot of people throughout the race just because of pacing, and we were able to increase our intensity over time rather than slow down. So we got to the ski erg, which was the first exercise. We paced ourselves there. Same thing. We didn't go out too hard. And we switched every 2 minutes or so. And then our plans really with the runs was to have the first one be the slowest, the next 2 kilometers a little bit faster, and then every run after that faster as well. Because Mike is naturally stronger, we did have him start some of the exercises just to get started. And then for others where I felt like I could take it off first, then I would start that exercise as well. Throughout the race, the only thing that was tough was the sled push, which unfortunately was the second exercise. I don't know if we got a tougher turf or something, but it felt really impossible when I was pushing it. So Mike, unfortunately, had to take a bit more of the sled push on, which was unfortunate. So I think that left him a bit more gassed for our third run. But I was in charge of pacing all the runs, so we kind of held back a little bit, and then we were able to pick it up and increase. So overall, everything else felt really good. We were able to stick to our plan. We paced ourselves really well and felt fairly strong throughout. And because of the strategy we had, we didn't have to say too many words during the race other than encouraging each other and just counting our laps. So overall, super happy. In terms of nutrition, so I'll start with hydration. So we made about 3 stops, I think, at the water stations. Our code word was water if someone needed to drink, and then we stopped and we had a few sips. Hyrox also offers an electrolyte beverage and then a Red Bull. But because we hadn't practiced with either, stuck with the water, it's always important to make sure you don't try anything new. So I would always default to water if you haven't tried anything else, because you don't know how your GI system will react. In terms of fueling, for a Hyrox race this length, my goal was to take in 25 grams of carbs right away before the race start, and then have one more gel with 40 grams of carbs about halfway through. So generally recommend, as I mentioned, we can think about a Hyrox race being somewhat similar to a half marathon. So we kind of want to aim for that 30 to 60 gram per hour of carbohydrate mark. However, that can count per hour if you do take it in very close to the race. So I didn't mention this, but I had a gel about 15 minutes before so that I could have just one more during the race, just for more timing and convenience. The thing is, though, there really isn't nearly as much research on Hyrox nutrition as there is long distance running. So we're kind of just making more, I guess, connections and like extrapolations based on the physiological demands in terms of nutrition. Hopefully more, and I'm sure more research will be coming out. But generally I have athletes, and what I practice myself is doing nutrition targets similar to a half marathon race. So because you don't want to run out of glycogen, and Hyrox is a really intense race, you want to be taking in some carbohydrates during it. So you're not going through it without taking anything in. And further, running on low blood sugar and training on empty can be a risk factor for GI issues. So it's really best to stay fueled. So while I won't go into too much detail, you do want to aim for a carbohydrate source if you're taking it in during hard exercise with a 2-to-1 ratio of glucose to fructose, because our body is better able to take in more carbohydrates if there is a mix of both glucose and fructose, and no high FODMAP additives, ideally. Because the row involved less bouncing and jostling around, I took my gel in just before the row so that it could settle in a little bit and feel good. Overall, I'm super happy with how everything went. I didn't have any gut issues. There were 0 cramps, no nausea, no bathroom stops, and felt really strong throughout. Was able to pick up the pacing of the runs, which was awesome, able to push, and we finished feeling really strong. So overall, really, really great. Now let's talk about after the race, so the celebration time. So we did have some friends who greeted us at the finish line. We were able to take our finishing photo and just celebrate, which was awesome. Naturally, because neither of us is really ever done with exercise, Mike also wanted to try the dead hang competition, which was right outside the finish line. So I wasn't really interested in competing, but it's always nice to do like a hang from bars. Just a dead hang helps to decompress the spine, and especially after a Hyrox activity with a lot of pushing and a lot of intense work, it can help with recovery too. So we tried that. It was quite late when we finished. So again, race started at 6:30. So we were done at 7:45. But the time, we got packed up and left, it was later. So we needed to get some dinner immediately. Right after the race, though, I did have about half another protein shake just to get something quickly, and about 500 mils of water with the rest of my electrolytes. We headed back downtown to Ottawa and found a nice vegetarian, more plant-based restaurant and had a really awesome meal. I would look for something with some carbs, some protein in it, and lots of vegetables, just because I was missing eating my usual amount with the carb load. Plus, the antioxidants in the veggies do help with recovery too. So it was a great day overall, and always really nice to have some time to celebrate after. So let's talk about the following day and recovery. So the next day we did stay in Ottawa for most of the day before heading back. We went back to that coffee shop as well because, as I said, best oat latte I ever had. So just needed to go back there. I didn't run the day after. I just did some walking and some mobility work to help with recovery. If I hadn't been dealing with that nerve irritation, which I didn't mention, but I actually felt amazing during the race. I didn't feel it at all. It was probably a mix of the endorphins, the treatment, and the warm up. Felt great, but I was a bit more sore the day after. Generally, I would do like a night easy run to recover, but I didn't do anything after the race, just mobility and lots of walking, which was nice. And then we actually went back to the Hyrox venue. With Hyrox, what's awesome is it's really fun to spectate and go watch other people and cheer them on. So we were able to watch some friends compete and, just kind of soak in what we had done. It's always really nice actually to compete and then go watch and cheer on other people, knowing that the hard work is behind you and you've accomplished what you set out to do, and be able to cheer other people on. So that was super fun. Then we drove back to Toronto. And for the rest of the weekend, we enjoyed some outdoor activities, went on a group hike, did an easy run out by the lake, and focused more on recovery and low intensity activity for the weekend to help with that recovery. And nutrition was the same as usual, keeping protein high and helping with the replenishment process so that I could recover well. So overall, it was a really successful event. I was very happy with our time considering I'd just come off a marathon personal best 4 weeks before, and didn't really train Hyrox as intently as, would want to or needed to. And while I still enjoy road racing primarily, I'd love to do more Hyrox mixed doubles and maybe another women's singles now that I have more of the race practice under my belt. All that to say, when it comes to preparation, it doesn't just start, a week before or a couple of days before. All of my nutrition strategies, including the pre-race meals, carb loading, intra-workout nutrition, all of that has been practiced and fine-tuned in training so that I have no surprises come race day. And it is absolutely possible to compete in and train for high intensity events like Hyrox and also marathon running without your gut holding you back. And one reason I love racing is because it helps me better support my coaching clients by understanding the demands of the sport as well as the preparation and fueling involved. So if you're an endurance athlete training for your next long distance event or your Hyrox competition and you want to create a personalized plan to fuel your next race and keep your gut happy, I'd love to chat. When we work together one-on-one, we will take into account your fitness, nutrition history, as well as unique needs and gut health profile. And together we'll develop a custom fueling plan to ensure you're eating enough to meet your needs during training, hydrating effectively, utilizing supplements like caffeine optimally, and also creating the best plan of action to crush your races without the GI distress. If you're interested, you can apply for coaching with me from the link in the show notes, and you'll be able to book in a free 30-minute call where we'll chat more about whether my program and working together is the best fit for you. So there you have it. That's today's episode, how a dietitian fuels a Hyrox race for both performance and digestive comfort. I hope you found this episode helpful. If you have any questions or comments, thoughts, please leave a comment below. And if you can too, share it with a friend or a peer or a colleague that's also training for their first or maybe their another, their seasoned Hyrox athlete, but they need some inspiration with nutrition. I'd love for you to share this episode with them. So that's all for now. Thank you so much and stay tuned. I'll see you in the next episode.